It's late, I'm on the floor. I've read over 300 books this year. Let's talk about the worst things I read in that year because it wasn't a lot, but they were memorable. Starting off with Icebreaker. I hated Icebreaker. And the thing about Icebreaker is that I went into it knowing I wasn't gonna like it. But it was one of those things where like everyone hated it. It was so divisive. It was so controversial. People were constantly bringing it up for no reason. I was feeling left out of the conversation, but I couldn't just like give my 2 cents on the material without having read the material. So I read the material and I hate the material. I hate the material so much. This was so beige in the most painful way possible. It doesn't even feel like a book. I wouldn't even classify this as romance. This is just erotica, which is fine, but there's no real plot, no real romance. Every single scene that isn't a sex scene in this book feels like a really boring transition period to move us into the next sex scene. There's no real character development or personalities from these two. There's a sex scene where one of them is dressed up as Gru, but most egregious, there's a scene while the girl is on top of the guy in this, and she just does the splits. She does the splits mid-ride. I hate it. It was also so long. This was the year I got really into manhwas and webtoons, and so I read My Ideas Gangnam Beauty because I saw that there's a K-drama for it, that there's a K-drama and a Thai drama adaptation for this one webtoon. That must mean it's good, right? No. My Ideas Gangnam Beauty is so boring, and it also falls so flat on this like attempt at a self-love narrative. My Kingdom, for a crumb of personality from this main character or her love interest, it was just so bleh, and it would not end. This was the manhwa that would never. And also the K-drama manages to be even more boring than the webtoon, which I didn't even think was like possible to do. I couldn't even finish the K-drama. The K-drama was not good. And then there was Lights Out, which went crazy viral this year, and I don't understand how. Although I do understand how. The target demographic for Lights Out, which is a like super like surface level dark romance, it just barely scratches the surface of dark romance, and apparently it's supposed to be like people's intro to dark romance, so it's not as heavy on the dark subject matter. It's a stalker romance about this guy who's like one of those masked thirst trappers on TikTok, although it's not mentioned, like TikTok isn't mentioned by name, but it's totally TikTok. And he ends up stalking one of his like biggest fans, not biggest fans, but she follows him and she doesn't realize that like her stalker is this guy who she follows on not TikTok. And it's a whole thing, and it completely is just not good. Target demographic for Lights Out is those people on TikTok who are like, book talk has been summoned at any generic white man. I mean that wholeheartedly. Like genuinely, that is the type of person that our main character is. That she, like, our heroine of the story. Like, she is one of those people. So I should have known, like, from the jump that this was not going to be for me, but I kept reading anyways, and I wish I hadn't. Because at the halfway point, this book, it completely falls apart and becomes something else. It just becomes like this really lazy, slapped together attempt to set up the world building for book 2, which is like kind of like a mafia romance, and it's just so bleh. I think the best thing about this book is the audiobook. The audiobook narrator, like for the guy specifically, fantastic. That is it. And then there was Basted, which is a sentient turkey baster romance between a woman and multiple talking turkey basters. Here's the thing, I love a super weird sentient object romance, and I was not expecting this to be the pinnacle of literature. I was not expecting this to share a shelf with Shakespeare. This was always going to be kind of cringy, kind of bad, kind of weird, kind of freaky. That is the standard for this super niche subgenre, but this was so nauseating. There are a bajillion trillion and one mentions of fluids in this book, and it was just nasty. It was so nasty. It was so things were always dripping somewhere. I've read a lot of really like kind of unsettling borderline horror novel sentient object romances, like the other thing on this list, freaking Faulty, which is just Furby fanfiction. It's not a Furby, I think it's called a Furbo in the book. But there's like this giant sentient Furby toy that turns gigantic and gets really horny at night, and it's genuinely, I think this is one of the scariest things I've read all year. No, like there's like kind of freaky, kind of weird in a funny way, and then there's like whatever these two books are, where I am living in a state of fear. I'm deeply unsettled down to my core. I want to throw up a little bit. There was Pride and Protest, which I DNF'd. I think I tapped out like before I even hit the 30% mark of this book. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but it's really annoying. I really did not like this at all. It features a black woman and an Asian man, and what was getting me is that these two kept microaggressing, like racially microaggressing each other. The vibe was very much so that one scene from Ginny and Georgia. I've never even seen that show, but I know that scene, that terrible, horrible scene.
Excuse me? What? Literally, what? Because if we're gonna play that game, let's do it. Oppression Olympics. Let's go.
It was just weird, and I just like didn't enjoy don't enjoy narratives where people have to overcome like racial biases in order to fall in love with the person that they're racially microaggressing or people that they're racist against. It was just not the vibe. I did not like this at all. And there was more. Another book that I DNF'd. This is a memoir about like a woman and her open marriage. How did she even came to enter an open marriage with her husband? And I was like kind of with it. It wasn't the most interesting thing, but it was like I was curious enough to stick with it for a little while. And then there's a whole section where she's talking about like once this whole open marriage situation is proposed and she goes on these dating apps and stuff, how she makes this alter ego that is a Latina alter ego. This is a white woman. This is a non-Latina white woman who made this like sexy Latina character to get men or to like flirt with guys online, and I just didn't appreciate the digital brown face of it all. It was very strange. It wasn't even like addressed or like brought up with any sort of like shame or regret. She does apologize for this later. I did not get to that point. It was not happening soon enough after it was mentioned. And then there was Late Night Love, which is advertised as Colin Jost Michael Shea fanfiction, although it's not. That part is a joke. It is, however, fanfiction of that SNL show, of the Weekend Update. It's just two different people, two different comedy writers at totally not SNL. I read a show called oh god, what is it? Live from New York. That's what the show is called. And these two comedy writers do the Weekend Update segment, but it's enemies to lovers, workplace enemies to lovers. I really hate a modern workplace enemies to lovers anything because it's so boring. The enemies are just like super passive aggressive and childish in a not fun way. Also, what was really getting to me is that like these are two comedy writers. One of them, the woman, is a comedian. I did not laugh once. This is painfully unfunny. It's constant. There are constant jokes being put in. There are constant talks about the segments and the jokes for the segment, and it's just not funny. And there's the entirety of the DNF library series, which is a whole, okay, I have to actually explain myself with this one. I challenged myself to read all 12 books in this series. None of them go past like even like 150 pages. All super short novellas. And here's the thing about the DNF library, like this series, the goal is to make erotic books that are so cringy and awful that it forces the reader to DNF. It wants to make you quit reading. The goal is to be so awful that you want to stop looking at the words. I wanted to challenge myself and prove something that I could actually get through all of them without DNFing. And I did, unfortunately, and I am worse for it. This has taken years off my lifespan. This is so overwhelmingly disgusting. All of the books are written by different authors, but I think what's so weird are the things that it has in common, like the super weird names for genitalia. Meat curtains, meat butterfly. There is the inclusion of so much really bizarre baby talk. Insta-love is present in all of them. One of them, I'm convinced, is just Elon Musk fanfiction because it features this really obnoxious, ugly billionaire who has a poverty kink where he makes the women he's with say stuff about being on food stamps. I'm not joking. Some of these aren't even like cringe in a regular kind of way. They're just sort of cringe in that I think someone involved is a victim, like a barely legal teen being like abused by her unwell father after losing her mother and being rescued by a much older man and immediately wanting to jump his bones and him being like, well, she is legal and she likes me, I guess. Jail! One of them features a puppy pad in a way I'm not describing further. The series is unfortunately very successful in what it aims to do. That does not make it any less painful to experience, any less awful in nature. I think an argument can be made that these are really great qualifiers for the horror genre since they are meant to disturb and unsettle down to your core. And then some dishonorable mentions are some of the early DNFs. These are books that I DNF'd almost immediately after picking up. I don't even remember the percentage. It's probably less than 5% of the way into whatever it was. Momfluenced, which is like top of the list because of just how disappointed I was. I'm really fascinated about the world of like mommy bloggers and family vloggers and all of this stuff. This is such a new ish genre, we haven't seen the full effects of like how this impacts children as they grow up into adults. We're getting hints of it. Some of them are entering like adult age, and this is only going to continue to develop further, be able to be studied further. So I was really curious about like a nonfiction deep dive into the world of momfluencers specifically, but it was really obvious and really clear super early on that this author is writing this book completely in the defense of momfluencers and reducing all criticism of like mommy bloggers and all that stuff to misogyny and jealousy and misunderstanding of like what is a real job. While I agree that a lot of like the hate that momfluencers and stuff get is from people just hating influencers in general and thinking that social media is not a real job, that's not the only source of dislike towards these people. There are so many valid concerns about the general well-being and mental health and safety of the children being documented and used for free labor and free content. It just like was not being touched on or considered, and I did not like that. I need balance. You're more than welcome to like find the good in this as a career for people, but I think it's disingenuous to position it as only good, because it's not. It's really not. Any industry that profits off of children is not 100% good. And then there was another nonfiction read of Boys and Men, which is like a book by a man about men and about boys and why young men are struggling so much in different areas of society. Why there's a really big gap in education between boys and girls right now. Right now, girls and women are leading in education. Girls and women have higher grades, more degrees, more success in the world of education at like every single level. Also looking to see like what the problem with boys and men are and why they're struggling to find their place into society, why we have the incel. What was really frustrating is that so much of this author, of what he's saying, is sort of like insisting that this is all stemming from biological differences between men and women, and it was just so much focus on biology and the natural development of boy brains versus girl brains. There was just like not any mention at all in like these early chapters of socialization and the role that gendered-based socialization plays on how people develop within their respective gender. Maybe he does talk about it later in the book, but it was just, we kept circling back and getting really repetitive on certain topics, and he just wasn't branching out, and then he would move on to a different topic. It was annoying. I didn't want to risk reading an entire book of just that. And then there was a manga that was really frustrating, Lovesick Ellie. I saw clips from like the live action J-drama adaptation of it. It looked cute, and when I see a J-drama that I really like, I go to check the manga first. And here's my thing, I love a pathetic man. I love when a guy is like embarrassingly so in love with a girl. Like I love it. I eat it up. When a girl is being pathetic for a guy, no thanks. And that's what Ellie was. Ellie is very embarrassing and difficult to watch. She's so in love with this guy who does not give two shits about her, and I'm sure he grows to give a shit about her. It's a romance, it's a love story, whatever, but I hate that she's so head over heels for him and he sees her as a joke. If it were the other way around, I would think differently, and I wouldn't care. I do hold that double standard, but it was just so difficult to watch as is, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it past the first volume. I don't even think I made it past like the first like 2 or 3 chapters of this volume. And that was really it. I didn't have very many books that I hated this year, which is pretty good. Like this was a really, really strong reading year for a lot of different reasons. I was actually really surprised that I couldn't find that many books that like ruined my day. I feel like I had so many more last year. I feel like I had at least double this amount last year. And I hope things don't get worse next year. And yeah, anyways, that's it. What were your worst reads of the year? Please rant in great detail in the comment section. I love to read it. I love haters. Threads may be in constant debate about whether or not it's mean to even post a negative review at all ever. I really love to see people really passionately tearing something to shreds. I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I think it makes the world go round. Also, thank you so much for watching my hater shit. Although I don't think I was that much of a hater. I don't think I was as mean as I could have been, as I feel like I should have been for some of these. Anyways, thank you for watching.